I'm Lisa, 29F, and I've been married to Jonathan, 32M, for 2 years now. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot. From the very beginning of our relationship, I made it crystal clear that I didn't want children. Jonathan always said he was fine with that, and I believed him. I grew up in a dysfunctional family in a small town in Ohio. My father passed away in a car accident when I was 4, leaving my mother to raise me and my younger brother Tom, 26M, alone. She struggled with depression and alcoholism, often neglecting us. I had to step up and take care of Tom from a young age. As I got older, the responsibility became overwhelming. By the time I was 10, I was cooking, cleaning, and helping Tom with homework while trying to keep up with my own studies. My mother would disappear for days, leaving us to fend for ourselves. When she was home, she was often drunk and verbally abusive. I remember one particularly bad night when I was 12. Mom came home drunk and started yelling at us for leaving dirty dishes in the sink. She threw a plate at the wall, narrowly missing my head. Tom was crying, and I had to comfort him while cleaning up the broken glass. That night, I promised myself I'd never put a child through what I experienced. Throughout my teenage years, I became more of a parent to Tom than a sister. I'd wake him up for school, pack his lunches, and help him with his homework. I even attended his parent-teacher conferences when Mom was too drunk or absent to go. It was exhausting, and I often felt resentful. But I knew Tom needed me, so I pushed through. My own education suffered as a result. I was often too tired to focus in class or complete my assignments. My grades slipped, and my dream of going to college seemed to be slipping away. It wasn't until my high school guidance counselor noticed something was wrong that things started to change. Ms. Johnson, my counselor, took me under her wing. She helped me apply for scholarships and encouraged me to open up about my home situation. With her support, I managed to graduate with decent grades and got accepted to a state university with a partial scholarship. Leaving for college was both a relief and a source of guilt. I was finally free from the constant responsibility, but I worried about Tom. I made sure to call him every day and sent him care packages when I could. It was during this time that I really started to think about my future and what I wanted from life. The thought of having kids of my own filled me with anxiety. I knew I couldn't handle the responsibility and didn't want to risk repeating the cycle of neglect. The idea of being tied down by children made me feel panicky and trapped. I decided then that I would remain child-free. After college, I moved to Chicago for work and lost touch with my mother. Tom was old enough to take care of himself by then, and we maintained a close relationship despite the distance. He understood my decision to be child-free and supported me, even when our extended family criticized my choice. When I met Jonathan at a friend's birthday party, I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and easy laugh. We hit it off right away, talking for hours about our shared love of travel and photography. On our third date, I told him about my decision to be child-free. I was nervous, as previous relationships had ended over this issue. To my relief, Jonathan said he understood and was open to a life without kids. He told me he'd never felt strongly about having children and valued his career and freedom too much to be tied down by parenthood. We discussed it several times throughout our relationship, and he always assured me he was on the same page. As our relationship grew more serious, I introduced Jonathan to Tom. They got along well, and Jonathan seemed to understand the close bond I shared with my brother. He never pressured me to reconnect with my mother or judged me for my strained family relationships. Jonathan's family, on the other hand, was picture perfect. His parents had been happily married for 40 years, and he had 2 older sisters, both of whom had children. At first, I was intimidated by their close-knit dynamic, so different from my own family experience. But they welcomed me warmly, and I grew to love spending holidays with them. When Jonathan proposed after 3 years of dating, I was overjoyed. We had built a life together that I loved, we both had successful careers, traveled often, and enjoyed our freedom. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood and accepted me. Our wedding was small but beautiful. Tom walked me down the aisle, and Ms. Johnson, my old guidance counselor, was there to celebrate with us. Jonathan's family went all out with the planning, and for once, I felt like I was part of a real, loving family. The first 2 years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a cozy apartment in the city, adopted a cat, and continued to enjoy our child-free lifestyle. We never argued about kids or felt pressured by each other to change our minds. Last week, everything changed. I finally opened up to Jonathan about my childhood. I'd never shared the full extent of what I went through before. It was emotionally draining, but I felt relieved to finally tell someone everything. I told him about the nights spent comforting Tom while Mom was passed out drunk, about missing school to take care of the house, about the constant fear and anxiety I lived with. Jonathan held me as I cried and seemed very supportive. He told me how brave I was and how much he admired my strength. I felt closer to him than ever before, grateful to have such an understanding partner. The next day, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Jonathan with takeout from our favorite restaurant. As I approached our apartment, I heard Jonathan's voice through the open window. He was on the phone, and something in his tone made me pause. I overheard Jonathan talking to his mother. He was telling her about my past, which hurt me. I had shared that in confidence. But what he said next shattered my world. He complained that if he'd known the real reason I didn't want kids, he wouldn't have married me. He called my decision selfish and said he was considering leaving me. I stood there, frozen, as Jonathan went on to say he had always hoped I would change my mind about kids. He told his mother he thought my childhood trauma was something I could get over with time and therapy. He even suggested that having a baby might heal me and make me forget about my past. I was devastated. I'd always been upfront about not wanting children. Jonathan had years to voice any concerns or leave if he wasn't truly okay with it. Instead, he pretended to be fine with my choice while secretly hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't confront Jonathan immediately. I was too shocked and hurt to form coherent thoughts. I quietly entered the apartment after he hung up, pretending I hadn't heard anything. Jonathan greeted me with a smile and a kiss, acting as if everything was normal. It made me feel sick. For the past week, I've been living in a daze. Our entire relationship feels like a lie now. Every memory, every moment we shared, is tainted by the knowledge that Jonathan wasn't being honest with me. I keep replaying conversations in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. I'm not sure how to move forward. Part of me wants to confront Jonathan and demand answers. How could he lie to me for so long? Did he ever truly accept me, or was he always waiting for me to change? Another part of me wants to pack my bags and leave without a word. The betrayal feels too deep to overcome. I've confided in my best friend, Rachel, 30F, about what I overheard. She was furious on my behalf and offered to let me stay with her if I decide to leave Jonathan. But the thought of ending my marriage is terrifying, even though I know I can't stay with someone who would deceive me like this. I'm also worried about how Jonathan's family will react if we split up. They become like the family I never had, and the thought of losing them hurts almost as much as losing Jonathan. Will they understand my side, or will they see me as the villain who denied their son the chance to be a father? For now, I'm going through the motions of daily life, pretending everything is fine while I try to figure out what to do. Jonathan has noticed that I'm distant, but I've blamed it on stress at work. I'm not sure how long I can keep up this charade. I feel like my world has been turned upside down. The one person I thought I could trust completely has betrayed me in the worst way possible. I don't know if I can ever trust Jonathan, or anyone, again after this. Update 1, it's been 3 weeks since I overheard Jonathan's phone call with his mother. I still haven't confronted him directly, but I've been watching his behavior closely. He's been acting extra attentive and affectionate, which now feels manipulative given what I know. I decided to test the waters by bringing up the topic of children again. Over dinner one night, I casually mentioned that a colleague of mine had recently gotten her tubes tied. I told Jonathan I was considering doing the same to ensure I never get pregnant. His reaction was very telling. He immediately tensed up and tried to discourage me from such a drastic step. When I suggested he could get a vasectomy instead since it's a simpler procedure, he looked horrified. He made excuses about it being too expensive and unnecessary. This confirmed my suspicions that he's been hoping I'd change my mind about kids all along. I've also noticed Jonathan has been initiating intimacy much more frequently since our conversation about my childhood. It's as if he's trying to get me pregnant before I can go through with sterilization. I've been making excuses to avoid sex, which is clearly frustrating him. The betrayal runs deeper than I initially thought. Not only did Jonathan lie about being okay with not having kids, but it seems he's been actively trying to manipulate me into pregnancy. I feel violated and furious. I've started quietly making plans to leave. I reached out to Rachel and explained the full situation. She's offered to let me stay with her for as long as I need. I'm also looking into my options for divorce, though the thought of ending my marriage still feels surreal. Last week, I had lunch with Tom. I couldn't bring myself to tell him everything, but I did mention that Jonathan and I were having some issues. Tom could tell something was seriously wrong and kept pressing for details. I ended up breaking down in tears in the middle of the restaurant. Tom was furious when I finally told him what I'd overheard. He wanted to confront Jonathan himself, but I begged him not to. I'm not ready for a confrontation yet. Tom reluctantly agreed but made me promise to call him if I needed anything. I've also been in touch with Ms. Johnson, my old guidance counselor. She's been a constant source of support throughout my life, and I needed her wisdom now more than ever. She reminded me that I'm strong enough to get through this and that I shouldn't compromise on something as fundamental as having children. At work, I've been struggling to focus. My boss pulled me aside last week to ask if everything was okay. I managed to hold it together and blame it on some family issues, but I'm worried my performance is suffering. I can't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. Jonathan's family invited us over for Sunday dinner last weekend. I almost didn't go, but I was afraid of raising suspicions. Sitting around the table with them, watching Jonathan play with his nieces and nephews, was torture. His mother kept making comments about how great Jonathan is with kids and how we shouldn't wait too long to start our own family. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to avoid breaking down. I've been having nightmares about being trapped in a house full of crying babies, unable to escape. I wake up in a cold sweat, relieved to find myself alone in bed. I've been sleeping in the guest room, telling Jonathan I've been having trouble sleeping and don't want to disturb him. Part of me still wants to confront Jonathan and hear his side of the story. But I'm afraid of what other lies might come out if we have that conversation. I don't know if I can handle any more betrayal right now. For now, I'm focusing on protecting myself. I've hidden my birth control where Jonathan can't find it, and I'm being extra vigilant. I never thought I'd have to guard myself against my own husband like this. The trust between us is completely shattered. I've started looking for apartments, just in case I need to move out quickly. I've also been slowly gathering important documents and sentimental items, storing them at Rachel's place for safekeeping. The hardest part is pretending everything is normal. I go through the motions of being a loving wife, cooking dinner, asking about his day, watching TV together in the evenings. But inside, I'm screaming. Every touch, every kiss feels like a lie now. I know I need to make a decision soon. I can't live like this indefinitely. But the thought of confronting Jonathan and ending my marriage is paralyzing. I've built my entire adult life around this relationship. Starting over at 29 feels daunting. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm trying to stay strong and remind myself that I deserve better than this. I deserve a partner who truly accepts me for who I am, not someone who sees me as a project to be changed. Update 2, things came to a head last night. Jonathan cornered me in the kitchen and demanded to know why I've been so distant lately. He accused me of having an affair, saying he couldn't think of any other reason for my behavior. In my anger and frustration, I blurted out that I knew about his conversation with his mother and his true feelings about having children. Jonathan initially tried to deny it, but when I told him exactly what I'd overheard, he broke down. He admitted that he'd always wanted kids and thought he could change my mind over time. He said he loved me too much to let me go when we were dating, so he pretended to be okay with not having children. I was furious. I reminded him of all the times I'd explicitly stated my stance on having kids. I asked him what his plan was if I never changed my mind. Jonathan hesitated, then confessed he thought an accidental pregnancy might force me to reconsider. That was the last straw for me. The idea that my husband would try to trap me into parenthood against my will was unforgivable. I told Jonathan our marriage was over and that I'd be moving out immediately. Jonathan begged me to reconsider. He promised to go to counseling and said we could work through this. But I knew there was no coming back from this level of betrayal. I packed a bag and left to stay with Rachel. The next day, I went back to the apartment while Jonathan was at work to gather more of my things. As I was packing, I found a journal hidden in Jonathan's desk drawer. I know I shouldn't have read it, but I couldn't help myself. What I found made me feel sick. Jonathan had been documenting his attempts to get me pregnant for months. He wrote about replacing my birth control pills with placebos, which thankfully didn't work because I had an IUD he didn't know about. He had plans to take me on a trip and forget to pack condoms. He even considered poking holes in the condoms we did use. Reading those entries made me realize how close I had come to being trapped in a life I never wanted. It also made me angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. How could I have been so blind? I've contacted a divorce lawyer and started the process of legally ending our marriage. Jonathan's family has been calling nonstop, trying to convince me to give him another chance. His mother left a particularly nasty voicemail, calling me selfish and accusing me of leading Jonathan on. I've blocked all their numbers. Some of our mutual friends have suggested I'm overreacting and should try to work things out. They say every marriage has its rough patches and that Jonathan's desire for children is natural. But I know in my heart this is the right decision. I refuse to stay with someone who would lie to me for years and try to manipulate me into a life I don't want. Tom has been my rock through all of this. He helped me move my things out of the apartment and has been staying with me at Rachel's place to make sure I'm okay. Having him here reminds me of our childhood, how we always protected each other. I'm grateful to have him in my life. I'm still struggling with feelings of betrayal and anger. Some days, I can barely get out of bed. Other days, I'm filled with a sense of relief that I discovered the truth before it was too late. It's a roller coaster of emotions, but I'm taking it one day at a time. Update 3. It's been 2 months since I left Jonathan. The divorce proceedings are underway, and I've moved into my own apartment. It's been a difficult adjustment, but I'm slowly starting to feel like myself again. Jonathan made several attempts to win me back in the first few weeks. He sent flowers, wrote long apology letters, and even showed up at my workplace once. Each time, I made it clear that reconciliation was not an option. Eventually, he seemed to accept that it was over. His family, however, has been relentless. They've tried reaching out to Tom and Rachel to get to me. Jonathan's sister cornered me at the grocery store last week, trying to persuade me to give Jonathan another chance. I've had to threaten legal action to get them to back off. Some mutual friends have taken Jonathan's side, saying I'm being too harsh. They argue that his desire for children is natural and that I should have expected him to hope I'd change my mind. I've distanced myself from these people. I'm grateful for friends like Rachel who have stood by me through all of this. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of Jonathan's betrayal and my childhood issues. It's bringing up a lot of painful memories, but I know it's necessary for healing. We've been discussing my fear of commitment and trust issues, which stem from both my childhood and this experience with Jonathan. The hardest part has been coming to terms with the fact that the man I thought I knew never really existed. The Jonathan I loved was a facade, carefully crafted to be what he thought I wanted. The real Jonathan was willing to lie and manipulate to get what he wanted, regardless of my feelings or choices. I've had moments of doubt, wondering if I'm making the right decision. There are nights when I miss the comfort of our shared life, the inside jokes, the familiarity. But then I remind myself of the betrayal, of the journal entries detailing his plans to trap me into pregnancy, and I know I'm doing the right thing. Last week, I ran into Jonathan's mother at a cafe. She tried to talk to me, saying Jonathan was miserable without me and that we could still work things out. I stood my ground and told her that her son's actions were unforgivable. I explained how violating and manipulative his behavior had been. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She apologized for her previous behavior and said she hadn't realized the full extent of what Jonathan had done. Despite the pain and anger, I know I made the right decision in leaving. I refuse to compromise on something as fundamental as having children. I deserve a partner who truly accepts me for who I am, not someone who sees me as a project to be changed. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life as a single woman. I've started taking photography classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for when I was with Jonathan. I'm rediscovering old hobbies, spending time with supportive friends, and learning to trust my own judgment again. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful for the future. This experience has only reinforced my decision to remain child-free. I'm more certain than ever that it's the right choice for me. I've scheduled an appointment to discuss permanent sterilization options with my doctor. I never want to worry about an accidental pregnancy again. Tom has been talking about moving to the city to be closer to me. While part of me worries about him uprooting his life on my account, I can't deny that having him nearby would be comforting. We've always been there for each other, and I'm realizing more than ever how important that bond is. As for my mother, I received a letter from her last month. She's in rehab again and wants to reconnect. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Part of me wants to give her another chance, but I'm also wary of letting her back into my life. My therapist and I are working through these feelings, and I know I don't have to make a decision right away. For now, I'm taking life one day at a time. Some days are harder than others, but I'm proud of myself for standing up for what I believe in. I know there's a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I'm excited about what the future might hold.